With so many of us switching out our weight rooms for our living rooms, we're going to be utilizing a lot of body weight volume workouts to keep our fitness up. But that doesn't mean we can't inject any sort of intensity or variation into our workouts while we're at home over the next couple of weeks. For example, you can take something like your trusty backpack, load it up with various textbooks or other items, and it becomes an external loaded object that you can use to make loaded squat variations, press variations, hinge variations, and so on. Just remember, whatever you put in here is going to increase the load, aka the intensity of the movement. Make sure that you don't just throw a ton of weight in and then do 100 reps of a squat, having never prepared for that yourself. Make sure that you think about how much weight is in the bag, what reps am I performing, and above all else, what do we care about? Movement. Make sure that your mechanics are on point, and if you ever begin to falter, take that weight off, remove something from the backpack, or just perform the unloaded variation from there on out. An air squat can become a number of different loaded squat variations. The first would be our bear squat. We're gonna hug that load up against the chest like a bear hug and perform our same standard movement pattern, just with the load up against the chest. Much like our goblet squat, we can hold that load up against the chest with elbows down. Again, same movement pattern. Just a load held up front. We can also throw that backpack on like we're walking around school. Throw the hands out to counterbalance the weight behind us and sit into our full squat, this time with the load in back. All right, now let's talk pressing. Obviously, push-ups are awesome, and doing them in the right way is a great way to improve your pressing strength, but we can't press overhead without an external load. So that same backpack can go ahead and do wonders, held up in that front rack position, rolling the rib cage down. We can perform that same strict press that we might with dumbbells or barbells, but now we're just using that external load via the backpack instead. Notice that my lower body is completely rigid and stable, my abs have been flexed, my rib cage rolled down, and I'm pressing directly overhead. We can also perform an alternating push press, which we are going to get that little dip, drive with the hips, press up and over to the other shoulder, rebounding back and forth. Careful not to hit your head. Obviously, if you have a backpack with straps, worry about that hitting you in the face. Lastly, we can go ahead and perform a variation of that horizontal press by performing a floor press, resting the elbows and upper arms on the ground in that same externally rotated position, pressing to full extension and back down to the chest. All right, let's talk about loaded hinging now. Grabbing that backpack, we can perform our good morning movement with the back simply worn as normal. Soft bend in the knee, feet stacked directly under the hips, reaching the butt back, letting the torso come forward while maintaining that nice neutral spine and torso, back tall to the top. We can do the exact same thing, simply with the weight placed on something that we would call the back rack position, held across the shoulders rather than worn, making sure that we're not placing too much stress on the neck and or head. We can also perform a very similar movement, but putting the weight out in front of us, held long and loose by the arms, like our RDL. As if we were holding a set of dumbbells or a barbell, soft bend in the knee, we're going to push the hips back, let that weight travel down the legs until we feel the stretch through the hamstrings, maintaining that neutral spine, standing tall to the top. This would be our weighted RDL. We can also very much perform a number of different, call them Oli variations with a simple backpack. Obviously, this is going to place some strain on your backpack, so make sure that it's durable and you pay attention to some wear and tear. But the first, just like we would with a med ball, we can perform something that's much like a snatch or a clean and press. Think of it as just ground to overhead. We're going to set up in that good pull from the floor position. We're going to press the floor away, transition that weight directly overhead, let the weight come back down the exact same way. We can also perform a smaller range of motion of that same movement, perhaps with a heavier load. We are going to set up in that good pull from the floor position, and we are going to pop that weight up into what we would call the front rack position. Obviously, you might get slapped in the face with a few of the straps, as I am right now, but it works great. You can also very much perform something akin to a kettlebell swing or a dumbbell swing, simply by making sure you have a great hold on the backpack and performing that same swing up to either eye or overhead positioning. Lastly, if you have enough weight, you can absolutely perform something much like a deadlift. Just like we would with a kettlebell or a dumbbell, we can set ourselves up with feet just outside of the weight itself, set ourselves into a good pull from the floor position, and press the floor away, lift tall. Even with a moderate weight done with enough reps, this can certainly replace some of that lower body pulling movement that you can't get without an external load. All right, let's talk lunging. A couple things we can do here. The first is by putting that load up in our, call it front rack position, and then performing any number of our lunge variations. The first would be our stationary forward lunge. We're gonna go out and make sure that that knee is directly stacked over the ankle, the hip is underneath the shoulders and over top the knee, and press back to full extension, alternating legs, or all one leg and then all the other, depending on the workout itself. You could also very much perform the exact reverse movement with a back lunge, weight held in the same position. And of course, you could always perform a walking variation with the load held in that front rack position. Very similarly, but a simple variation, you can either wear this like a normal backpack, place it up across the shoulders in our back rack position, and perform all of those same lunges, alternating forward or alternating reverse lunges. And lastly, of course, our standard walking lunge. Okay, let's talk upper body pulling, one of the hardest things to do without equipment in your own home. One of the things we can do is a horizontal row using that backpack. First, we can do it two-handed, making sure that we find a way to get a good grip on this bag, set ourselves up in that good, almost stable hinge position. Then we're going to pull up to the chest, squeeze at the top, relax down to the bottom. This would be much like our barbell bent over row. We can also perform a one arm, aka unilateral variation of the exact same thing. Again, this all depends on where you grab the bag. If you grab at the top, you might not have enough room to pull. So you're gonna wanna probably grab something on the side, stabilize yourself into a good bent over neutral spine position. Then we're going to pull up like you're turning on a lawnmower with complete control and isolation through that lat. Okay, just because we're at home and we don't have equipment doesn't mean we can't do a little bit of arm farm while we're here. We can take that backpack, it's got a nice handy loop for us. We can actually perform a single arm bicep curl. In fact, the movement of the weight as we pull will actually make this difficult beyond the weight itself. We can also target the back of the upper arm with a tricep extension, just like we would in any strict press, making sure that we roll that rib cage down and flex the abs, and we are going to extend the elbow while pressing the weight overhead. We can also make movements like planks more difficult by adding the weight to the hold itself. Getting down into our plank position, wearing the backpack per normal, will make it more difficult and require greater stabilization. You can perform it with a full push-up plank or down in that elbow plank position, making sure that you're still engaging the core and keeping the hips high. We can also take the standard push-up and make it more difficult by adding the load to our back during the actual movement. Putting the backpack on, keeping it balanced on our back, we perform our standard full range of motion body weight press, just with increased intensity, aka loading. Don't also underestimate the power of a loaded carry, especially an odd object carry. What I mean by that is any external load can be carried in a number of different positions and holds that make any simple walk very difficult. We can simply hold something in the front rack, stabilizing ourselves throughout a walk. We can press to extension, maintaining a neutral spine, and walk to whatever distance we've been prescribed. We can also do the same thing with a suitcase carry, like we would with any dumbbell on either arm. And if you are really good, you can also press one arm up overhead for a unilateral overhead carry.